All right, welcome. So this video is fear limits growth and prevents success. Right? This video is all about the problem with fear as far as your goals and as far as your self-improvement goes. Fear itself is the main limiting factor for any form of growth or any form of success in life, because fear has this effect of we understand that there is typically, in the face of a threat, there are two options. There is fight and there is flight. But we don't necessarily always talk about the third option, which is freeze. And if you think about a possum will play dead in the face of a threat as a method of getting whatever predator to leave it alone. There are other animals in the wild that use this method as well. Human beings have it, but we're obviously intelligent enough to know that freezing in the face of most threats is the worst thing you can do. But when it comes to fear, fear is an emotion that initiates this freeze effect, because if we are afraid of moving forward, then we don't really have the focus and the drive to push through whatever threat is facing us, right? We don't have the nervous activation to push through that threat. However, we don't want to back off, because right now we're talking about our success, right? We are afraid of achieving our goals. So we don't want to flee or run away from the situation, because it is something we want to move forward with. But this fear blocks us from being able to do so. So we end up freezing. And this is why you are going to be limited on the amount of growth that you're able to experience, because fear is basically not allowing you to give your all to the work, to your process, right? To your daily routine, to your habits, to your personal growth and your goals. So therefore, it's going to limit the amount of growth you can experience. Even if you're able to get the work done, if you're still in this state of fear, you're not going to be able to get as much out of that work as you would if you were fully confident in the direction that you were moving. So why having fear is worse than any negative outcome that your brain can come up with. This first section is about basically discrediting fear, right? The whole idea here is to discredit the fear that you are facing. Because yes, having fear is not the worst thing in the world, because it is a positive effect, or it is a positive thing in the wild. If we sense a threat, that fear is a emotional response that should drive some form of action in order to prevent any negative situation happening, right? It is a prediction of the future and then a response. So it is a useful thing. Fear is a useful thing that we experience. It is an emotion that is designed to protect us. But the thing is, when it comes to our goals in life, when it comes to most of the fear we experience on a day-to-day basis, right? This is not about legitimate threats, but this is about most illegitimate fears and anxieties that we face on a day-to-day basis, or when it comes to our goals. A lot of people who have big goals, big ambitions, they can have a lot of fear associated with the outcome of that, because it's so foreign to the way that they've lived their lives in the past. So this is the type of fear I'm talking about. This illegitimate fear and anxiety that we experience on a day-to-day basis. What do I mean by having fear is worse than the negative outcome? This is because having fear puts you in a negative state. It puts you in a state of fear, which then results in you vibrating on that frequency, which in effect will have you attracting more things that are of that nature to your life. As well as having this fear may stop you from actually pursuing the goals you have, and therefore, experiencing the positive effect of what might happen. Now, this isn't to say that bad things don't happen and that to be afraid of the future is completely irrational, right? There are definitely things that will happen that may be difficult, that may be challenging in your future, but having fear and sitting in this emotion on a constant basis is only going to drain your energy. And it's also going to essentially keep you from moving towards a positive future. Now, the negative outcomes that your brain are coming up with, right? All of these things that could happen in the future aren't as bad as your brain makes them out to be. They aren't as challenging or as difficult or as life-threatening and life-ending as your brain makes them out to be. But having this fear, being in this state of fear, it seems as though it's the end of the world. It seems as though this negative thing that's coming is going to be the absolute end of the world, or end of your world rather, and that it is something to stress about. In reality, it's not something to stress about. It's not something to worry about right now. And the only thing that you really should be worried about right now is having this fear, is holding on to this fear, is being in this state of constant anxiety. That's the thing that you want to actually address now, because that's going to be the most present and prominent threat to your current self and to your future self that you're experiencing in this moment. All of the things that you are fearing in the future, A, are not as bad as your brain makes them out to be, and B, half of them won't even happen. The other half might happen, but not in the way you imagine, and the leftovers of what you were afraid of that did happen accurately aren't going to be as bad as you thought they were. So it isn't worth your stress, right? But the brain is going to make it to seem as though it is worse than it is, which is going to become a present issue for you. So the fear itself is actually the major issue. The fear is the problem, not what you are afraid of. So how does fear actually sabotage growth? This is basically just the fact that if you are afraid, you are not in a state where you can actually focus and where you can actually progress at a rapid pace. You are not in a psychological, emotional, or physical state where you are able to actually push the needle forward, where you are able to trust the process and give it your all, because you're stuck in this state of fear. You're going to restrain yourself, right? You are going to keep yourself from going all in, because in your mind, going all in means something negative. So how do we transmute fear into courage? So this is actually the solution to this issue, which is to transmute fear into courage. And the thing that you have to understand is courage is never void of fear, right? These opposites always have to exist in order to feel or experience the contrast, right? Good and positivity cannot exist in a world without evil, because there's nothing to contrast it against, right? So fear is just contrast to courage. The feeling of courage only exists because we are initially afraid. And so when we understand this, we realize fear isn't actually a reason to quit, right? Fear isn't a reason to stop. Fear is not a sign that it's time to go back. Fear is just another threshold, just another wall that you'll have to overcome and break through in order to get to where you're trying to go. So we want to learn how to transmute fear into courage. Transmutation is the process of converting emotions from one state to another through actions and through conscious practices. So transmutation is simply converting one energy from one state to another. So when we have fear, when we are afraid, right, we can take this fear and use it as energy to drive us towards our goals. We just have to learn to transmute it before we can actually do so. So the process is, when we identify fear, when we identify something that we're afraid of, when we identify some type of blockage like this, some sort of psychological blockage, we want to identify where this fear is coming from. A lot of times, people who want to become successful have a fear of their own success, their own potential, the result of all of this work. And this fear is something that you want to find the source of, right? So in that case, a lot of times the source is simply just that they've never experienced it in the past, and or they have beliefs around money that make them think that money is evil, or they will become evil as a result of making money. And so there is that fear around it. And there are many other reasons why you might be afraid. But once you can identify the source, right? In this case, you've never experienced this level of success in the past. So you're afraid of, who might I become? What might I do with this success? Which is a rational fear. But the thing is, you have to understand, it is up to the person that you become. So if you're actively becoming the wrong type of person in pursuit of this goal, maybe that fear is valid. But if you know you're becoming a better person in pursuit of this goal, then you want to understand that you're becoming the person who could handle this success. Therefore, there's no reason to be afraid. And then in that moment, in that realization of where it's coming from, you can then turn it over or shift the mind state over to a state of courage, right? Over to a state of, okay, well, I understand where this fear is coming from, but I am going to push through and overcome this fear so that I can see the result that I seek. And then we utilize this feeling of courage to push through and see for ourselves what it is we might be afraid of, see for ourselves and experience for ourselves what it is we fear, and face it directly instead of staying in this state of being stuck in the mind and stuck in fear, stuck being afraid of who we might become, what might we do, or anything for that matter, right? Any form of fear that is coming in, don't sit there and be afraid of it. Don't sit there and let it consume your mind. Actually face it directly by pushing through. So leaning into fear to build well-rounded confidence. So here's another thing to think about, right? When we have all of this fear surrounding certain things that we want to maybe do with our lives, or maybe things we don't consider wanting to do, but we have this fear built around it, this basically limits us, right? This limits what we can actually pursue, what ways we're able to express ourselves. So learning to lean into fear, lean into the things you are most afraid of, and learn to overcome this fear is actually going to help you to build more well-rounded confidence, because you are able to trust yourself within multiple different fields, right? So you can trust yourself across multiple different types of fields that you may have had fear around before. So like before I graduated high school, I had this major fear around sports, right? When I was young, I was not very athletic, and then I started to train and work out more, and I even decided to become a professional athlete at one point during high school, early in high school. So I basically had this complete transformation where I was totally unathletic, and then I decided I wanted to be a professional snowboarder. So I had to change. I had to transform that. I had to overcome that fear of whether or not I would ever be good enough, whether or not it was even safe to pursue, right? Snowboarding is a very dangerous sport, to be honest with you. Well, not dangerous if you do it correctly, but there are a lot of factors and reasons and ways that you can get hurt within the sport. So there is a lot of fear associated with that. So I had to overcome that fear and learn how to beat and overcome that fear. And that even brought me to playing school sports by the end of my high school season, I guess, the phase of my life where I was in high school. By the end of high school, before I graduated, I had actually started playing sports for the school as well as training for my sport to become a professional athlete. And that helped me to build more confidence, because an area where I used to be very insecure, I now had developed a lot of confidence in, and I even became very fit and athletic for, in comparison to people I was graduating with. Obviously, I wouldn't say like I'm the topmost elite athlete, but I'm definitely on my way, right? So I have built this level of confidence around an area where I used to be highly insecure, and that helped me to build more confidence. And then once I did that, I was able to have much more confidence and much more courage, I guess you could say, when it came to starting to create content and starting to create my YouTube channel. And that's actually where I started my YouTube channel, was right after my last soccer season. So after my last soccer season, right around that New Year's, is when I started my first, or not started my first channel, but first started this channel. It's when I recorded my first video for this channel, which I believe is still up. You can go check it out. It's called My Biggest Mistake on Self-Improvement. I was able to overcome this thing that I was afraid of before, which then led me to having more confidence in other fields. And now I'm able to go pursue other things with a deeper level of confidence, because I know that, I was able to overcome something I never thought I'd be able to overcome. I was able to become somebody who is polar opposite to who I thought I was stuck being before. So now that I've seen that transformation once, I know that I can do it again and again and again. I know that if I am afraid of something, or if I have insecurity about something, it isn't set in stone, right? I can actually go and overcome that thing. Right now, I have a lot of fear associated with the next level in my snowboarding, right? There is a jump or a leap of growth and progress that I need to make in order to get to the level that I want to be competing at, which means that I have to overcome a whole new set of fears, right? I have to learn to hit jumps with more speed, hit bigger jumps, hit jumps while doing more dangerous tricks. I'm starting to learn inverted aerials, or you could just, say it normal and call them flips, but I'm learning inverted aerials, which are flips and corks, anything that goes upside down or your head isn't straight up. They call it inverted. So I am starting to learn some more complex tricks, some more dangerous tricks, but there is a barrier of fear that I have to overcome in order to do that. But now I understand that that fear is not a major blockage unless I make it a major blockage. That fear is not set in stone. The thing I am afraid of as the result is not actually destiny or fate. What actually happens when I go and face that directly is what is set in stone, is what is fate. And so if I'm in fear, I don't even know the outcome yet. I don't even know the result yet. But I can also use this fear as a means of preparation. So I understand that there is a challenge in front of me that is slightly bigger, slightly greater than my current capacity, which I can then use as a signal to prepare, right, for preparation. But it isn't going to mean that I am going to stop here. It just means that I may need to prepare for the next level. And so when you lean into fear, when you lean into the things you're afraid of, you actually become significantly more confident in yourself because you're removing things that are limiting your capacity to express yourself. You are removing things that were limiters, that were limiting factors, but are now skills of yours, right? Advantages of yours. And so when you learn to do this and you do it across multiple different fields, you will build up a level of well-rounded confidence that not many people can get to, because so many people are stuck in this fear loop and they stay right where they are comfortable. They always stay right where they're comfortable. And so there's no growth. There is never any growth. Fear limits this growth, but leaning into fear exhibits it. So that is all I have for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. I do educational content for people on self-improvement, for athletes and for entrepreneurs who want to perform to the best of their ability. If you are interested, you can go ahead and click the link to my Instagram and send me a DM over there. I work one-on-one with athletes, entrepreneurs, and top performers in order to increase performance, increase productivity, and optimize your lifestyle for the most possible growth and progress. So if that's something you're interested in, if you are looking for holistic self-improvement approaches to growth, progress, and success, you can go ahead and check out that. If you want a lower budget program, that is coming. I am working on a lower ticket program that is going to go over the basics of everything. I'm going to be covering topics like fitness, nutrition, sexual transmutation, productivity, dopamine detoxing, and a lot more. So if that's something you're interested in, just keep your eyes out. I am working tirelessly to release this program for you guys and make sure it is as good as possible. So if you're interested in that, you just got to hang around a little while longer. I'm looking to launch around mid-July, so we will see how close I am by then. If I can launch earlier, I will do that as well. But if you want to work with me one-on-one, I am doing a one-on-one program right now, so you can go ahead and just DM me on Instagram. Other than that, that is all from me, and I'm out of here. Peace.